Namaste Sangam Talks viewers. This is episode 5 in Luminaries of Bengal Series presented by Sangam Talks and Bangla Abar. Today's topic of this episode is Relevance of Rabindranath Thakur after 76 years of independence. We have two speakers today joining us who will be talking about Rabindranath Tagore ji, also known as Rabindranath Thakur. Our speaker today is Joydeep Maharaj and Priyadarshi Datta ji. First, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our speakers. Joydeep Maharaj was born in Lübeck, Germany in 1962, but he grew up in Kolkata, which is known as the cultural capital of India. During his years in the university as a student of English literature, he developed a passion for theatre. He found a job in a bank and tried to settle down in a so called normal family life, but fatigue had set in. Joydeep ji owes his spiritual legacy to Swami Paramananda, the great mystic monk of Bengal, who was loved and revered by thousands of followers across the world. His untimely demise in 1999, at the age of 45, left a void, and Joydeep ji gradually transformed from being a seeker and writer to a spiritual teacher. Today, at 61, Joydeep Maharaj is a popular motivator, feared by religious establishments but loved and respected by the youths for his openness, vivacity, and dynamism. Namaste, Joydeep ji. Welcome again to today's talk. Our other speaker today is Mr. Priyadarshi Datta. Priyadarshi Datta ji, born in 1974, is a writer, columnist, and independent researcher based in New Delhi. He is the author of the book The Microphone Man: How Orators Created a Modern India. It was published in 2019. It is the only work dealing with genesis and development of public speaking in India. He is a columnist with news portals like News 18 and First Post. He was a regular writer for The Pioneer between 2001 and 2021. He also writes poems, short stories in Bengali as well as in Hindi. Welcome again, Priyadarshi sir.
Welcome.
Our moderator today for this talk is Hemanti Banerjee ji. Namaste, Hemanti Banerjee. Welcome to the Sangam Talks. Hemanti Banerjee ji hails from Dhanbad, Jharkhand, and currently lives in Boston, USA. She is the current president of Bangla Abar. Hemanti ji is a healthcare technology expert currently working for Boston Children's Hospital. He is a director of Boston Center of Excellence of Health and Human Development. She is also a certified yoga teacher who has taught in the Boston area for the past 25 years. She is a classical dance enthusiast and she dances in Odissi style. She has a master's degree in physics from Banaras Hindu University and a master's degree in computer science from Boston University. With that, I'll ask Mantiji to take over and start this conversation for today.
Namaskar. Thank you, Akshay, for the kind introduction, and welcome all our viewers to this session. On behalf of Bangla Abar, I welcome you to this episode of the Bengal Luminaries series. Many thanks to Sangam Talks for hosting this series. A little bit about Bangla Abar. Our NGO in the United States and Bharat. Bangla Abar means Bengal again. Our mission is to create awareness and educate the world about Bengal's culture, history, and heritage. We have been organizing many activities and events for the last 3 years, including celebrating the lives of forgotten freedom fighters, Durgotsav, film festival, etc. Now, today's topic, relevance of Rabindranath after 76 years of independence. Popularly known as Tagore is our dear Rabindranath. His family name was Thakur, which was anglicized as Tagore. Rabindranath, as I know from my childhood, as introduced by my father, was Rabi Thakur as part of our family. Like Chanda Mama, Rabi Thakur has been the growing up experience via his poems, dramas, songs, what not. Did I really understand his poems and songs when I was young? I must confess, no, not. As I grow older, only now I am beginning to fathom the Vishwakobi, Kobi Guru Rabindranath. He was indeed a Renaissance thinker of his era, well ahead of his era. Today, we are going to present to you a few essential facets of this great man of India. On the other hand, Rabindranath read a vast proportion of native literature, including Vaishnav Padavali, Mangal Kabbo, Aul, Baul, and other types of Bengali lyrics. He was also attracted by Buddhist philosophy. Though he was grounded in Upanishadic philosophy, since his childhood association with Brahmo Samaj, on the other hand, he he had an in-depth reading of Herbert Spencer, J.J. Rousseau, Bertrand Russell, Kipling, and all other well-known philosophers, novelists, and educationists. The humanist, romantic, and aesthetic poet Rabindranath reached his highest level of ecstasy in spite of waves of personal losses and pain, which he accepted in everyday life. Some may find in him the grandeur of Western personalities such as William Shakespeare, Alfred Tennyson, P.B. Shelley, Wordsworth, John Keats, and the great Kalidas of Bharat. Rabindranath is said to have born and bred up in an atmosphere of the confluence of three movements, all of which were revolutionary. First, the movement to reorient and reposition Hindu Dharma and Hindu Samaj. Again, we must remember the great Rajarshi Raja Ram Mohan Roy. That was the movement of Brahmo Samaj, of which Rabindranath is a direct inheritor. The second was the change in the spirit and the form of literature after the initial contributions of Ram Mohan Roy, who some regard as the father of Bengali prose. His earliest books on Bengali prose were Vedanto Grantho, Vedanto Sar, which were published in 1815 and 1816, respectively. Gauriya Vyakaran is the first complete Bangla grammar written in Bengali. It was authored by Raja Ram Mohan Roy and published by the Calcutta School Book Society in 1833. We had a couple of sessions with us, we had in past few weeks on Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Brahmo Samaj. Viewers, if you are interested, please go back and check it in YouTube. First complete Bangla grammar as it was written by a Bengali and was authored by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Then came Rishi and Sahitya Samrat Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, who was said to have freed the Bengali language and literature from a rhetoric rigid as death and the lift the dead weight of ponderous forms from our language. The third revolution was the rising political consciousness of India and the revolt against foreign rule and oppression. Whether it was the Hindu Mela or later Anushinal Samiti and Jugantar revolutionary groups. Though they affected the whole of India, all three movements had their origin in Bengal. And in all three, the members of the Thakur family took an active part. It is natural, therefore, that young Rabindranath's outlook on life and literature profoundly influenced that period as a lover of freedom in social, religious, political, and literary spheres. We have two eminent speakers, Sri Joydev Maharaj. He will be speaking on different aspects of Rabindranath. Over to you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Hoymanti Namaskar to Hoymanti and Priyadarshi the eminent speakers, and also to all the members of the audience who are present. And Hoymanti have given a very wonderful introduction of Rabindranath Thakur. It is a challenge for us Bengalis to try and present Rabindranath Thakur to people who do not speak Bengali, both in India and abroad. People know him as the one who had won the Nobel Prize and who had written the national anthem, and he had a long beard. Except for that, there is not much that people know about him. And I cannot really blame them because I remember when I was in class 9, we had a teacher, and his name was Dominic Gomes. He was our English teacher. He used to make us read parts of the Gitanjali in English because it was part of our syllabus. And while we read these parts, he used to recite from memory the original Bengali Gitanjali just to demonstrate to us how poor the translations were. So sometimes we used to laugh together with our teacher when we used to compare the original with the translations. And we cannot blame Rabindranath Thakur for that, because where would he find in those days someone who knew Bangla and English like mother tongues, and also someone who was a poet both in Bengali and English? Only that someone can probably do some kind of faint justice to Rabindranath's language and literature, which for me I think is untranslatable in any European language. You take, for example, the famous Bengali line, Chitto jeta bhoy shunno, Uchcho jeta shir. Even for non-Bengali audience, you will recognize some words, and you will feel the resonance of this pronouncement. You can say an utterance. Chitto jeta bhoy shunno, Uchcho jeta shir. In translation, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. It's nice, but it's like a sermon. It's really like a sermon if you compare to the Bengali one, which is sheer and pure poetry, almost like a Sanskrit mantra. You see, that is the problem that we suffered, and that is the problem I think why the West and everybody seem to lost interest in Rabindranath Thakur, because of this problem with translation. You take, for example, some simple song like তুমি কেমন করে গান করো হে গুনি আমি অবাক হয়ে শুনি কেবল শুনি. Now nowadays if we try to sort of in a poor way, if we try to translate, how do you sing, dear maestro, i I just listen mesmerized, something like that. But if you see the original translation in Gitanjali, it's I know not how thou singest, my master. I ever listen in silent amazement. Okay, people will get some information of what the poem is all about, but the beauty, the nuances, the direct communication with the singer, the appeal, the traction of the verse, the words, the play, that is completely lost. Or example, or take for that, আমারে তুমি অসীম করেছো এমনই লীলা তব, and that was translated to thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure. For nowadays we won't translate Leela as pleasure. Leela, you can say, is a divine play. So all these problems with the translations, that really was a big problem for non-Bengalis to understand or appreciate the essence of Rabindranath, and that is a great problem, I think, for us to convey. As you have just said, that you grew up with Rabindranath Thakur. I think we all did for generations. We grew up feeling, we grew up responding to nature, we grew up loving, we grew up with pain, with suffering, with sadness, and everywhere Rabindranath was with us. Everywhere. And it is very difficult to convey this through his songs, through his poems, through his wit, even his prose, his stories, his works for children, the wonderful poems that are actually stories. A few days ago, I was talking with some of my friends about how we have lost the tradition of telling stories through poems and songs. You see, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and all these, all the folk culture is full of this stories of gods and goddesses, of kings, of stories of ordinary people, all told in verses, all told in songs. And Rabindranath Thakur tried to do that many times. He created musicals and he wrote many poems, wonderful poems, brilliant poems, stories, stories about from the Ramayana Mahabharata, stories from historical events, stories from day to day life, stories about a servant, to stories about a man who lost his land to the zamindar, and all these things, the whole gamut of life. He used to tell a lot of stories in poems. So Rabindranath Thakur he wrote, let's say, more than 2,300 songs, more than 2,000 poems, more than 100 short stories, and some of these short stories are brilliant. And he was one of the pioneers of story writing, short story writing. I just invite some of our readers, some of our audience, to at least read some of these stories of Rabindranath Tagore. Nowadays, over the last couple of decades, good translations are being available in Penguin is publishing some good translations of Rabindranath Tagore's stories. He was a great story writer, a great playwright, a great essayist, a commentator, a brilliant letter writer. So he was all these things rolled into one. As you have said, he was a Renaissance. I mean, that period we do point out is a period of Bengali Renaissance, but he was almost a single handed Renaissance man as far as literature and creativity is concerned. Plus, he was a director of plays, he was an actor himself, he was a dancer, he was the creator of Vishwabharati. He was a zamindar who had a large estate to look after, and he did that very meticulously. So that is one point that I wanted to emphasize on, the difficulty of conveying not only the greatness of Rabindranath, not only the genius of Rabindranath, but the impact, the influence that he has on us, not only had, still has on us. It's very difficult to convey that. Some of his songs, which he himself claimed would live forever, maybe not his other things, his novels and his poems may die out. And these songs, nowadays, most of my friends who sing, who are singers, they say they consider Rabindra Sangeet to be modern Bengali songs. They are so timeless. They are so relevant. They touch every aspect of our life. As I was saying, our sense of beauty, love, pain, separation. And from that, I come to the next point that, as you had just mentioned about his personal losses, about his tragedies in life, we call him a Rishi poet. Now, what's significant about being a Rishi? And why do we say that he's a Rishi poet? Remember that the great Ramayana was composed by a Rishi, not just a poet. The great Mahabharata was composed by a Rishi. So all the great knowledge that has come down to us from ancient times have been utterances of rishis. And Rabindranath Tagore was a rishi in the sense that he was passive, he was detached. Whatever he was talking about, he never really got terribly involved in these things so that he could observe life from a distance, enjoy, and at the same time see all the sides of the story. If you are agenda driven, if you are politically driven, if you are ideologically driven, the quality of your output suffers. And Rabindranath Tagore was never that. He was never driven by ideology, by a particular ideology that he had to convey. He was never driven by any political opinions when he was creating, and he was never driven by any bias of any kind. So that when he described life that was happening also inside himself, his sadness, his sorrow, his losses, his pain, he was somehow detached. A part of him was detached from this so that he could really see the message. He really could see the unity in everything. And all his output, whatever he wrote, somehow were an address to the divinity. Somehow they were like a prayer to the divinity. We used to say among friends that his songs are divided into sections: puja, praying, the seasons. He had many songs for each season. For example, spring, summer, autumn, monsoon, winter. And puja and praying, especially, we used to tell that somehow they become indistinguishable from each other. When that puja becomes praying and when that praying becomes puja, love, worship, devotion, they all roll into one. This kind of theme was always there in Rabindranath Tagore. All his works, from the beginning to the end, is like a huge epic, one wholesome experience. It's like a journey, and a very positive journey towards fulfillment, towards divinity, towards truth, towards beauty, towards harmony. That was it. That I think, from personally, others may have their own opinions. Readers will obviously interpret in their own way, but that to me is the hallmark, the greatness of Rabindranath Tagore. It's very difficult to pick up individual works and say, here it is different, here he's done this. He has. In fact, another thing about Rabindranath Tagore was that he constantly learned, he constantly evolved, so much so, and his towering presence was so all encompassing that even during his time, there was this Kollol Goshti, as you know, the young group of poets who were trying to do something different from Rabindranath Tagore. In the 60s and the 70s, some of the poets used to complain that when we try to talk about love or when we try to talk about life, we have nothing to say because he had said everything. He has just put everything into words, put everything, every sensitivity of ours, every feelings of ours. And it's very difficult. So that is why one of the reasons, Hoymantiji, I think that the next generation suddenly turned to atheism. You see, suddenly they were not believers anymore. Suddenly they tried to step out of the Indian ethos. And then, of course, came the communism and the Marxist influence or whatever. The hungry generation, the angry generation of poetry is very significant because Rabindranath Tagore, you will see, was never angry. That is also one of the things that makes him a rishi. In spite of all the criticisms, he used to make fun of himself. As you remember in Shesher Kobita, one of his last novels, in which he was making, as a young modern poet, he was making fun of Rabindranath Tagore, of himself. So that is the greatness of this man. He never reacted, he responded, and he evolved, he changed himself. For first, when Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay's first story came out in a different name, Mezdidi, and people thought that this story is so brilliant, it must be written by Rabindranath Tagore. And they gave it to him, he read it, and he said, such a great poet himself, he said, no, it is not written by me. but somebody has written it, and he's a better storyteller than I am. He's a better writer than I am. You see, that is the greatness, the humility, the love for literature, the way he inspired the young generation. He took all these brickbats, all these sufferings, personal losses, you know, and he tried to find a meaning in all this. And he did. He was a seeker. He was always a seeker, seeking the ultimate experiences of life and try to take the Bengalis along with him. He himself had claimed in Mangpute Rabindranath is a wonderful book where we get Rabindranath Thakur in completely a different mood, where he's telling Maitreyi Devi that one day Bengalis will realize what I have done for the language, what I have done for the culture. Single handedly, he took Bengali from infancy to maturity. He took Bengali to a level which is, incomparable, and at the same stage as the world stage. We were mentioning about other poets. Look, our little experience of about world literature has told me one thing, that if you take his plays, yes, you can compare him with Shakespeare, other playwrights. If you take his poems, yes, you can compare him with some others. You can take his stories, you can compare him with Chekhov and others. But as a whole, he's incomparable. His experience and his craft and his brilliance in every aspect of literature and other fields of art is just incomparable. And that is very difficult to convey to somebody else. The only thing I can say is that if you really want to enjoy, because Rabindranath Tagore is a lifetime experience for somebody who gets into it. There was a time when he became famous. Students used to come from Japan, from Europe, from China, just to stay in Shantiniketan, learn the Bengali language in order to read Rabindranath Tagore in original. You see? So that is the effort that they had put in, because somehow they realized that what we are getting in English or in other languages is just 1% of what he is. So I would invite the non-Bengali speaking members of the audience to at least start reading some of the English translations of his prose, especially his short stories. And then if you really want to enjoy the songs and the poems and the greatness and the brilliance of Rabindranath Tagore, learn Bengali. Otherwise, you will never get it. So that was my point, Hemantiji. Now you can sort of take on from here.
It was beautifully said, Maharaj. His vastness, his personality, as high as mountains, his thoughts are as deep as ocean. And still, in everyone's heart, like he touches everyone's heart. How is it possible? I always think about that. And the emotions, it resonates with our emotion. Our thoughts resonates with his thoughts. Like, it is unbelievable. And what you have mentioned, Maharaj, that quite a few points which beautifully said over here, that he was very much detached what he used to do, writing, in terms of writing, in terms of songs, in terms of drama, everything, the creativity. He was attached that moment. He was doing that. As soon as it is done, he was detached from itself. And that actually gives lot of divinity. It actually has the divinity. That's why it has all the divinity in all of his poems, songs, and it's still alive. We are singing. When we are in pain, we sing his song. When we are joyful, that time we recite his poem. So it's so beautiful. I would again please request you to go to your next session and elaborate the next session, the
Uh,
next
and,
topic.
what you said about detachment reminds me of a conversation between Rabindranath Thakur and Maitreyi Devi again. One day, Maitreyi Devi said, in her youthful and slightly, you can say, hurt or manner, that you are with us, talking with us, joking with us, playing with us, loving us. But somehow, when I see you alone, sitting at the window looking out, you're not here. You're far away. Somehow you're here and you're not here. Somehow something there is that we can't really hold you. You are somehow you are always elusive. And he smiled, and in a rare fit of, you can say, frankness, he said, "You're right. I have been always like this. I have never really anchored my boat anywhere particular. Though I have got married, I have children, I have done a lot of work, worldly things, but somehow I have remained outside this. Otherwise, I would not have been able to achieve what I have done in my life." So that was a very touching moment in trying to understand. And also, this is somehow, Hemantiji, I feel, for all those people who want to be writers and artists, this is a great learning experience for them also, because this is also a guidance to how one should approach his art, how one should approach life. He did not have a guru in the spiritual traditional sense, but he watched his father doing meditation every morning, and he used to do that throughout his life. Look at this rising sun and sit there for 1 hour, 2 hours, and that was all. And always he was in that mood, always an understated humor, sense of humor, this ability to laugh at everything, this ability to see the funny side of life in everything was so brilliant. Especially, you will notice that when he wrote literature for children, it was so wonderful. His fun, this fun loving the child that was in him. So yes, my second section, Mohamantiji, is on something entirely different. So I would like to hear a bit of what Priyadashiji has to say about Rabindranath Thakur. We all wish to learn from him a lot,
I,
because
I, yeah, I want to just, I remember one story actually. I just want to share with you that it was the month of August 1920. A letter came to Gurudev when we are talking about his poetry, his songs. The letter actually was written by Susan Wen, mother of Wilfred Wen, the famous poet. And she wrote to Rabindranath Tagore that I lost my eldest son 2 years back in a war in France. We are extremely sad and in despair. I do not know whether this letter will reach to you or not, because I do not have your address. At this moment, I think your name is your address. My son, before he went to war, he used to be engrossed in your poems. He used to read the following lines again and again. When I go from hence, let this be my parting word, that what I have seen is unsurpassable. Please do let me know, where do I get these beautiful poems of yours? That person was none other than poet Wilfred Wen, died at the age of 25. And that was translated from যাবার বেলা এ কথাটি বলে যেন যাই, যা দেখেছি যা পেয়েছি তুলনা তার নাই. And it's from Gitanjali, 142nd poem, part of it. Priyadarshi, Mr. Priyadarshi Datto, please elaborate, or if you have to share anything here, please go ahead.
please unmute yourself, Priyadashiji. You are muted.
Yes, I think you can listen to me now.
Yes.
No, again, we have
We
lost
cannot
you.
listen. Yeah, we cannot listen.
I think, can you listen to me now?
Yeah.
Yes, now we
Yeah,
can. Yes.
I think, am I audible? Yes. I think I was hesitant to speak when I heard about this, when I was invited, because Rabindranath Tagore. I just wanted to know that what is the audience? Is the audience going to be Bengali, or the audience is the national audience, which may not know Bengali, because Rabindranath Tagore was a Bengali poet, and most of his poems and the songs, and there is a fraction of his writings are in original English, and other things are translated. But this is a problem with not just Tagore, but many other people who write songs and poems, that they are cannot be rendered into a different language with the same kind of felicity as prose can be translated. It is easier to read a novelist or to an essayist in a different language, and we all do that. But a poem, and in Tagore's poems, most of the time the rhythm and the melody counts as much as the substance or the insight. So when we try to translate it, the rhythm and the melody is no longer there to that extent. It has happened with most of the translations are there, including his own. But anyway, what I can say that Joydeep Maharaj has lessened my burden by speaking on this aspect of Tagore. And but I'm just going to relate here a very small, very interesting anecdote, which I feel that Tagore, despite the disadvantages that accompany translation, has still reached out to a disproportionate number of people. At least people know him and people hold him in high esteem, although they may not know about the details of his writing. For example, when Tagore passed away, the Bishal Bharat Patrika, which was the Hindi, one of the Hindi magazines, which was published by Ramananda Chatterjee, who was to also bring out the Modern Review. In 1941 December or somewhere, they brought out a special issue on Tagore. And in that issue, which I have with me in a digital format, I find that many of the known Hindi literature have written in that. Also, in Tagore, though being writing in Bengali, it is true, but his Vishwabharati was able to attract talents from many places. People as different as Jawaharlal Nehru and Balraj Sahni would go there, and Balraj Sahni was associated with the teacher. And then Rabindranath Tagore, he did something like very few people know. He was the first person to introduce judo into India by inviting a judo expert, a judoka from the Japan. He was involved in so many things that the Tagore is like a banyan tree. So the people who even do not know Bengali, I'm surprised to find still they have read some of the Tagore's work and have a very high opinion about him. But as I shall speak later on probably, but there are some misgivings about the Tagore's have come up, and there are some doubts on him which we'll try to clear in this. But there is an interesting anecdote which I wish to close my intervention here. It was around the year 1943. I think Tagore has passed away, but India has not been partitioned yet, although partition was very much in the air, 1943 or 44, sometime like this. A delegation from Iran had come, which was called Persia in those days, to Delhi, and there is an Iranian Cultural Center which still stand there. Near, I think this is near Haley Road. So one of the Iranian scholar, who also happened to be a minister or ex-minister, I have forgotten. So when they spoke a lot of times, somebody asked him that who do you think is the most known poet of India in Persia? So he said undoubtedly Rabindranath Tagore. So at this, there was some Muslim journalist, and Delhi, as you know, was the headquarter of Muslim League at that time, and Muslim League was quite powerful at that time. It was, just a few years before the partition. They took an umbrage and said how it is not Iqbal, because Iqbal has written original works in Persian, original works in Farsi. So how come Tagore, by writing something in Bengali, could be rated about Iqbal in Persia? This story is related. Actually, this story is related in a biography of Iqbal written by Sachidananda Sinha, who also was the interim speaker of the Constituent Assembly before Dr. Rajendra Prasad became its president. He was the interim president. Sachidananda Sinha, a great politician and also a maker of modern Bihar. He is also said like that. So he says it in a biography of Iqbal. So they all walked out. The pro-Muslim League journalists walked out, and they say we are going to protest against it to the government of Persia. And initially, the Muslim Aligarh Muslim University also showed some interest into this. But ultimately, when it came to sending a signed letter to the government of Persia, most of them backed out. And so ultimately nothing came about to it. The Iranian minister, who had said that maybe Iqbal writes in Persian, we don't deny that. Maybe he is favorite of some people in Persia. But Tagore had come to Persia, and as far as the Indian poet is concerned, India is known through Tagore. That is a settled fact. And people know how. Could you understand Bengali? He said, no, we understand him through translation. English translations are available. So I said, although a translation may not be a very good understanding, my teacher used to say that if you want to translate from Bengali, Amar matha noto kore dao tomare charan dhura tole, मेरा सिर पकड़ के पटक दो तुम्हारे पैरों पर. So this is be laughable, but still it seems to have been bridged. And Tagore, I have found many people who are into literature have read Tagore through the translation. But as it happens in a present day, we have lesser amount of time, and probably that Tagore was, after all, a creative persona. We cannot just bound him through some ideology and through his opinions on certain issues. Tagore was, after all, a creative person, and a creative person, things come from within. So he may not conform to what we think about him. So that is what I find. But still, through translation, I think Tagore has still reached world over. And many people, as Mohammed said about Wilfred Owen, there are others like W.B. Yeats and others who have, loved Tagore. So this is what for the time being.
Hoymanti ji, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
Hoymanti ji, yes.
Mm-hmm.
You're still
again,
not audible.
Okay.
No, Hemant, I'm talking about Hoymanti ji. You are still not
Yes.
audible. Yes, now it's okay.
Okay, great. It's about what I can say, that it's about the magic of Rabindranath Tagore. Even though Maharaj mentioned, Mr. Datto, you mentioned that lot of the essence get lost in translation in many languages. His poetry, his poems, his novels has been translated to many languages, but still we get the essence. And people are from different parts of world. They know India through Thakur. So I'll request Maharaj to go to your next topic and enlighten our viewers.
Thank you, Hemant ji. And Priyadarshini's little speech has evoked a lot of wonderful thoughts in me. One of them being is slightly sad, slightly funny, about when Rabindranath Tagore tried to bring in a Japanese master to teach martial arts, especially to the girls, and he had to convince these girls of Vishwabharati to participate in these martial arts sessions. But finally, when the teacher came, I think his name was Okakura, I think you will correct me if I'm wrong. So he came, but all these girls remained inside. They refused to come out. And so Rabindranath Tagore had to really feel quite embarrassed in front of this teacher. The next day, he called all these girls who were supposed to take the class, and instead of being angry with them, he wrote a song for them. The song being Sankochero Bihubolata Nijero Apoman. That when you inhibit yourself, you insult yourself, And he made them, all these girls, learn and sing that song. So that was this is Rabindranath Tagore. This is the way he responded without harshly treating them, without scolding them, without getting very upset. He made them sing this song. So somehow, as this song becomes a mirror in front of them, because he really meant well. He really wanted the girls to be able to defend themselves in times of crisis. My second section, Haimantiji, as you have said, is about this concept of nationalism, which is a heated thing at that time. Even today, Rabindranath Tagore is being portrayed as someone who was not nationalist enough. Well, my first point, very vehemently, I would like to say, he was not a secular in the sense that we know today. Today, we know what seculars are. Secular means you bash Hindus and you shed crocodile tears for the minority community. That is called secularism in today's context. He was not at all a secular in that sense. And I would like to say that he was a very, very vocal Hindu and quite proud of his Hindu identity, quite concerned about the Hindu population of India, and he had many times expressed in various letters, in various interviews about his concerns, and he was very critical about the Islam ideology and the attitude of the Muslims in India. This point has to be noted. Before that, I would like to quote from Ramesh Chandra Mojumdar, his History of Bengal. He had written, Hindu national sentiments had built nests in the minds of many Hindu writers, though they would never consciously acknowledge it. Important. The best example is India's Rabindranath Tagore, whose famed international humanism cannot be reconciled with his communal views. But the truth is, many of his poems and adulations or tributes, many of his poems are adulations or tributes to the valor and courage of only Sikh, Rajput, and Marathi warriors. He had not written a single line glorifying Muslim bravehearts, though there were many in India. R.C. Mojumdar is saying this with a little bit of sadness, I think. From this, we can imagine the roots of the nationalistic sentiments in the 19th century Bengal. This is Ramesh Chandra Mojumdar. So this is not only true for Rabindranath Tagore, but also some others who tried to hide this bias. You see, somehow they had to, even like today, they had to act more progressive. They had to act like they are more, they feel brotherhood for each other, etc., etc. Another thing that we mistake about Rabindranath Tagore, that he was very, in a sense, opposed to the ideology of Shakta. You see, opposed to the ideology of Kali or worshipping India or Bharat as Bharat Mata, which is not true. He was a great admirer of Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's Anandamath and Bande Mataram. He set music to Bande Mataram. In fact, people, while we always mention about his songs, we forget to mention what a great composer he was. Another thing about Rabindranath Tagore that we must remember, that about of all his senses, he himself admitted, probably my ears are the best, because whatever he heard, he remembered. Even when he goes to Scotland or to Europe and he listens to some folk music there, somehow it remains somewhere inside. And many years later, the touch of that music comes out in some song that he composes. So he always said that the only thing that I want from God is take away all my senses in my old age, keep my ears alive. That is something that he suffered from. He became hard of hearing towards the later stages of his life. Anyway, so there is one poem which I would like to first, little bit of, that's just 4 lines in Bengali. He's invoking his country, Bharat Mata. ডান হাতে তোর খড়গ জলে বাহাত করে শঙ্কা হরণ দুই নয়নে স্নেহের হাসি ললাট নেত্র আগুন বরণ ওগো মা. He is invoking Bharat Mata in these words, which are very unlike Rabindranath Tagore or the idea of Rabindranath Tagore that people have, which very roughly, my very poor translation, it would be something like, in your right hand burns the falchion, the left hand robs our fears, the 2 eyes are filled with your affectionate smile, the third eye is the color of fire. Another little example. This, in a letter to Amir Chakraborty, 1934, 2 Bangla lines, which I'm not quoting in original, I'm just giving in the English version. Today they are pampering the Muslims. He's talking about the Indian National Congress. Today they are pampering the Muslims. The same Muslims will one day hold the mallet. Mushal Prushab Korbe will hold the mallet. In an interview to Anandabajar Potrika, 5th September 1923, he said, 40 lakh Hindus are scared to death of 1 lakh Muslims. Rabindranath Tagore is saying that. So much for your anti-national and secular. Then this another very interesting point. On the land of Bengal, the story of Ramayana has not been able to raise its head over the stories of Hargauri and Radhakrishna, and that is indeed unfortunate. Those who have accepted Ram as an ideal on the battlefield and their social activities have courage, valor, a sense of duty, and moral obligations which make them far superior to us. This is a quotation from Lok Sahitya, where he tries to say that we are so steeped in this Vaishnav traditions of Radha, Krishna, Kirtan, and amorous relationships, this and that, the sweetness, the memories, etc. We forget the valor, the sense of duty, the vision of Ram, the first person who tried to stew the whole Arjavata together through relationships, through friendship, through love, and also through conquest without occupying. For example, he conquered Sri Lanka but did not occupy Sri Lanka. These things have to be learned from him. So this is what he said, that somehow the Bengalis are still, enamored by these stories of Radha Krishna, and yet they are not being inspired by these great, courageous icons of our epics. In another place, this is a speech that he had given in a press meet in Times of India newspaper. A very important issue has made Hindu-Muslim unity virtually impossible, which is Muslims do not have loyalty to any particular country. Even a leader like Muhammad Ali was one of the founders of the Khilafat movement. Even a leader like Muhammad Ali has announced that under no circumstances will Muslims fight against Muslims to protect a country. There are numerous other instances of these such comments from Rabindranath Tagore. And people are somehow, even admirers of Rabindranath Tagore will be shocked by these statements, because we are so used to this soft secularism idea, and most of the secular people of Bengal, so-called secular, are great admirers of Rabindranath Tagore. They find in Rabindranath somebody who is their icon in as far as secularism is concerned. what what is different, as Priyadarshiji has rightly said, that we cannot really judge Rabindranath Tagore, his political thoughts, his nationalistic thoughts or whatever by today's standards, is he was not similarly critical of the Europeans. You see? So he was not at all, you can say, very sympathetic towards the extreme nationalistic elements in the Congress party, because he felt that they were imitating the European model of nationalism, which goes against the Indian or the Bharatiya ethos. This is very important, because he said that if the European model of nationalism is a yardstick, then what do? You go to other places and plunder countries, and you kill, and you destroy indigenous societies. You make them lose their memories. That is what you do. That is nationalism for them. That is the idea of the European nation state. This is not Bharat. This is not India. So he wanted freedom. He was a deeply patriotic person. He was very much a concerned Hindu, but he was not nationalistic in the sense of a jingoistic nationalism. You see, at least towards the first part of his, career, you can say, first part of his journey. Let's say, what he condemned was the narrow and the exclusionary model of nationalism that was adopted by the Europe, which has resulted in war, imperialism, and subjection of human beings. He was deadly against that. So such a model of nationalism, according to him, could not fulfill the moral, spiritual, and ethical needs of humanity. Now, you may agree or we may disagree with that point of view, but this was his point at that time. And his quote, his direct quote from Sadhana, so I repeat, we never can have a true view of man unless we have a love for him. If you think, okay, we understand Europe now, through hatred, that is his question. Through animosity, through mistrust, through suspicion, is that the way you know culture? So I repeat. So again, he says, so I repeat, we never can have a true view of man unless we have a love for him. Civilization must be judged and prized not by the amount of power it has developed, but by how much it has evolved and given expression to by its laws and institutions, the love of humanity. So this is Rabindranath Tagore, very idealistic. You can say he was always for him, the world had to be a perfect world. Maybe today, in today's context, we understand that the militancy of Hindu nationalism is probably required to counter the militancy of other forces. You see, we realize that. But in hindsight, after a lot of experience, and another thing about Rabindranath Tagore, and that's the last point which I would like to end with, Subhash Chandra Bose, when he was very young, talented, well known by that time because of his brilliant career, and Dilip Kumar Rai, being very close to Rabindranath Tagore and a great friend of Subhash, had brought Subhash to Rabindranath Tagore and just to do pranam and respects, etc., etc. And Rabindranath Tagore, in a faint sarcastic tone, he told Subhash, I hear that you are in this revolution path, nationalistic feelings. Why don't you become international? He said. Internationalism is better, isn't it? The nationalism. And the young Subhash had said, I think it is impossible to someone to become international without first becoming national. This is from a young Subhash, this was a wonderful answer, a wonderful response. You see, this same Rabindranath Tagore completely changed his views when the Second World War started. He began to realize what the Europeans were up to. He finally realized that, yes, we probably needed them in the sense that we had become a very close society because of the foreign invasions and all these things. And these Europeans had come to open us up. Okay, for that purpose has been served. The Second World War proved that it is not anymore about civilizing the world. This white man's burden is just garbage. He realized that. So it is rumored, Some of the Netaji scholars, they have told me this, that when he left Elgin Road, one of the first things he did was he went to Shantiniketan when Rabindranath was very old. He did pranam to him, and Rabindranath blessed him with all his heart. And he also, as you know, he also sort of dedicated Tashed Desh, the house of cards, you can say, to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, invoking him as the leader, as the hero that India needed. That at that moment he realized that yes, the Europeans would have to leave India. Though he was never really a British hater in that sense. So that was my point. And we can come back, Amintiji, to you and to Priyadashiji.
Mr. Dattu, if you want to shed any light on this one after Maharaj spoke. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
Yes. I think it's Jadip Maharaj had spoken very eloquently, and all his points are well taken. I have nothing to add to this session. I really enjoyed it.
That's great. I want to actually add little bit to it what Maharaj said. I will just extend. It is from The Crash of a Civilization, the book that Kanchan wrote. As Maharaj pointed out, that how he actually, people actually compartmentalize him. He is a very good poet. He was, a writer, a painter, everything, but not like nationalist in that way. He did not, they think like he did not talk about anything what happened, what Bharat went through. So that's the extension I'm just going to point out here. Rabindranath simply reminded the Hindus to shake off weakness, unite and fight for justice for all. Here is his appeal in very clear terms, and here is his warning for the Hindus. The terrible situation of the country makes my mind restless, and I cannot keep silent. Meaningless ritual keep the Hindus divided in 100 sects. So we are suffering from series of defeats. We are tired and worn out by the fortunes, by the internal, external enemies. The Muslims are united in religion and rituals. The Bengali Muslims, the South Indian Muslims, and even the Muslims outside India are all united. They always stand united in face of danger. The broken and divided Hindus will not be able to combat them. Days are coming when the Hindus will be again humiliated by the Muslims. You are a mother of children. One day you will die, passing the future of Hindu society, on the weak shoulders of your children, but think about their future. So this is what he said, and also he gave a clear indication about the solution path. That is also unbelievable. So that kingdom of idiocy, the fatal lack of common sense, was continuously invaded by the Pathans, sometimes by the Mughals, and sometimes by the British. From outside, we can only see the torture done by them, but they are only the tools of torture, not really the cause. The real reason for the torture is our lack of common sense and our idiocy. I'm just comprehending this after 76 years of independence. Are we out of that? Are we still lacking the common sense? I think yes, which is responsible for our sufferings. So we have to fight this idiocy that divided the Hindus and impose slavery on us. If we only think about the torture, we will not find any solution. But if we can get rid of our idiocy, the tyrants will surrender to us. And um, in an effort of national awakening of the Hindus, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, the great freedom leader, started Ganesh Utsav, as we know, and Shivaji Utsav, 1894, for national awakening. Many freedom fighters were inspired by this, especially by the ideals of Shivaji. And Rabindranath, his famous poem, Shivaji Utsav in Bangla, translation of a few most relevant stanzas are given, but I am just, I'll be focusing only one stanza, which actually intrigues me. A few distant centuries ago, on a nondescript day, I can barely imagine, upon what craggy hilltop, within a dense, sunless forest, O sovereign Shivaji, lightning like across your forehead, there flashed the thought from above with a singular religious thread. This torn up, fragmented Bharat I shall bind in one. This is what Rabindranath was, and he wrote. We'll go to the next section of Maharaj.
Yes, thank you, Hemanti ji, for the wonderful rejoinder. Yes, many of his poems we find this this is adulation of these great, brave, courageous heroes, Marathis and Rajputs. So, and even in one poem, I remember he's invoking the Javans. He's asked, not really invoking, he's addressing the Javans. That means, in this case, the Europeans, and saying, "Look what Rajput women can do. They can all jump into the fire to save their honor, their dignity, and to save their race." Meaning, of course, that it is not only their personal honor that they are saving; it is also the unwanted child that will be born in their womb, from their womb, and that child will later become an enemy of his own country. You see, so Rabindranath Tagore was very vocal about these things, and one must understand this. A question had come that this Shivaji Utsav, we have already mentioned that, Hemanti ji, we don't have to repeat, and his take on Hindutva. As I said, if we think of today's India and today's ideas of Hindutva, we cannot sort of look at Rabindranath from today's angles, as Priyadarshiji has also mentioned many times. But I think we have done enough to prove that he was a Hindu, very proud to be, and he detested that idea when somebody ever suggested that Brahmo Samaj was different from the Hindu Dharma. He wrote very clearly on the fact that you may say that Brahmo Samaj is different. I know that I am a Hindu. I'm a Hindu first, and the Brahmo Samaj is just one offshoot of our Hindu identity. So he was a very proud and a very conscious Hindu, and maybe there are some contradictions in him, but that is because he's an artist, and that is why we love him. Who doesn't? We are not like some homogeneous kind of a pillar. Well, if at age 20 I believe in something, and even at age 70 I will still believe the same thing. Why? Why won't I change? Why won't I grow? Why won't I evolve? So he was an artist in many ways. He was a child. He enjoyed life. He trusted life. Sometimes his trust was broken, and so he did change opinions. You see, as I was saying, he did not like Kali at one time. But then Nivedita, imagine a foreign lady, Nivedita came, and for hours she used to sit with him and explain to him the concepts of Kali. And Rabindranath's response was very interesting. He said, "I don't know how much I was convinced of Kali, but I saw another man between the two of us, and that is Vivekananda. It is the first time I found that a young, beautiful lady sitting in front of me, and I'm not the only man in her life. There's another one between the two of us. Very interesting observation from Rabindranath Tagore. Anyway, yes, coming to the third section, Homintaji, my third section is the fact that, you see, he was a great karma yogi. And why do I say that? Is because we always imagine Rabindranath Tagore on the desk writing, you see, or sort of going to a reception, or he's being felicitated in Vishwabharati or some other place, or he's giving a speech in a Congress session, you see. But we don't realize how much of a hard worker he was. He hardly wasted a single second of his life, and how disciplined he was. Another very important thing, where I think the next generation of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s poets somehow felt that becoming unruly, taking drugs, and drinking a lot of alcohol is like an artistic expression. That is what makes somebody an artist. You see, this is very, I think, very important to highlight this fact that Rabindranath Tagore was a very, very hard worker, and the whole day used to be a sort of a clockwork of activities. He was very disciplined. He woke up with the sun. He did his meditation. He took long walks. Then he had this one big glass of neem. Then he sat down on the desk. Not every day he was writing poetry. Maybe he was checking proofs. Maybe he was correcting somebody's article. Maybe he had written some history stuff himself, and he was revising that. He was constantly correcting, revising, changing, and then he went out. Then he had this estate. We imagine Rabindranath Tagore in this Vajra, in this special boat, moving around and writing wonderful poems. But he was also taking care of the huge estate under him. You see, among the 14 sons and daughters, he was the only one on whom Devendranath Tagore entrusted with the responsibility of the zamindari. He had faith in him. So Dwarkanath Thakur, who had sort of put himself into great debt because of his extravaganza, Devendranath Tagore managed to sort of somehow repay those debts, and Rabindranath Tagore managed to expand on that, while trying to be very honest and fair without being an oppressive zamindar. That was one. Second, how much work he put in for Vishwabharati, to collect the money, to make that Vishwabharati, and to do everything. So I think this is very important to understand that he not only was a great artist, a brilliant craftsman, a wonderful example, but also at a personal level, in his own lifestyle, he's somebody we should learn to emulate, because somehow, with all the Michael Jacksons and all the artists of the world, somehow we associate them with a kind of a sexual orgies, you see, lot of drugs, lot of indiscipline, lot of bohemian attitudes, even with our poets, somehow that notion has become stereocast. You see, we have to go back to the idea of a rishi poet whose sense of discipline is very impeccable, and his commitment to his art, commitment to his life, to his sadhana, to his Saraswati, is incomparable. So that, I think, is very important to highlight, that he was a great karma yogi, even at the age of 79, 80, when it was difficult for him to sit straight on the desk for a length of time. Even then, he tried not to waste a single moment of his conscious life, as much as he became conscious, maybe from a stupor, maybe from a drowsiness because of old age. He would sit up and try to write something, or call someone, dictate the next poem that he had in mind. You see, he was constantly, vigorously, he was creating something, looking after things, asking for somebody whether he's okay, whether that person has taken medicine, whether he's now well, what is happening there, what is the news. Always he tried to connect himself with everything, and he did not waste time. This is something very important for us to understand. And another thing that, in relation to this, I would like to say that somehow we have not really emulated his views on education. Hmm. He went to school. He tried to go to school. He tried to visit colleges, and it was impossible for him. That dreary, that the dehumanization of education, you can say, that everything was like a classroom, desk, numbers. He wrote Totapaki, Hemantiji and Priyodashiji, you know very well. It's so modern. This topic is about relevance. It's more than relevant. Now that the government is thinking of new education policy, they have to take notes from Rabindranath Tagore about his thoughts on education. He thought that he would reintroduce the Upanishadic Gurukul system in our education, which is very important, that the children must be with nature. And the learner, this is something that he said, that the learner must have freedom to learn. You see, nowadays we don't give any freedom to the learner. We just oppress him. He's in a jail, really. And to create an environment that enables the student to develop a kind of a healthy kinship, atmiyota, kinship with nature, and cultivation of the pupil's creativity and imagination, plus fun. What does the child want? He wants to play. He wants to jump about. He wants to sing. He wants to dance. If you just, if I mean, not you, I know you have done. If non-Bengali listeners just read the way he took some of these classes in Vishwabharati, they are so interesting. He made them so wonderfully funny and creative, with alphabets, with numbers. He created puns. He created rhythms, rhymes, limericks. So the children were just enjoying themselves and having fun, at the same time learning a lot of things without even being conscious about the fact that they were learning. This was education. This is what the government of India should have pursued after 1947. That should have been the method of education throughout the country. And look what he tried to do in Vishwabharati. Look at the architecture. Look at the innovative way he was thinking to sort of create an ambience. Vishwabharati. Look at the name also. And they're like a university, a global university, which welcomes all, together. We are all in it together. We are learning together. We are doing together. So this, and Brahmacharya, the man who said that Vairagya sadhane mukti she amar noy, that this Vairagya, this monkhood, this was a typical response to Ramakrishna Mission. Anyway, that is not for me. But for the same man, he realized the importance of Brahmacharya, which is something totally gone from our education. All over the world, it's exactly the opposite of Brahmacharya, our education. The teachers and the doctors, they prescribe something completely different. So Rabindranath Tagore was so progressive that what he felt, this is something, he could have just said, oh, I am a poet. I've got the Nobel Prize. I can just sit on my laurels and not think about these institutions. I can just tell my followers, admirers, to set up something like Vishwabharati. No, he did it himself. And he did not pass over this property to his own family. He entrusted the Prime Minister that he should be the Chancellor, and which is a tradition which is still going on, you see. So he really wanted this Vishwabharati experiment to be not as just a one-off. He wanted this to be the model for the future education policy of Bharat, which was, in a way, the model from the Vedantic times, you see. So I think this is somewhere we had sort of failed him a bit, And while talking about this vision, one must also read his thoughts on Panchayat. You see, we all talk about the Panchayat Raj, about Gandhi's writings on Panchayat. They are good writings, no doubt. But his writings are wonderful. And most of the policies of the government are based on what Rabindranath Tagore had written on the Panchayat system. Another false idea we have is that he was an urban person, that he did not really relate to the village. He did not really know the rural people. He knew them. If you see the stories, if you see the poems, if you see his interactions, he knew them very well. He understood them very well. In fact, while we were on the topic of nationalism and you were quoting all this also from Kanchanda, I remember one instance where in one of his estates, the Muslims were disturbing him a lot. So he appealed to the British administration, the then British administration, to do something about it. They did not. So what did he do? He called some Namashudras. He gave them money, he gave them payment, and formed an army of Namashudras to stand against the Muslims. Look how practical he was. Not at all the dreamer, the romantic, the poet, thinking about trees and sun and moon and divinity and love and all that. He was also very much grounded. So maybe it is true that his literature somehow has not yet caught on with the rural population of Bengal. It is true. I live in rural areas. I find that myself. Still, the people are stuck in kirtan, either kirtan or mindless music. They are still not transcended to the Rabindra Sangeet level. It is still a very, in a way, an urban, semi-urban passion. It is true. But Rabindranath as a karma yogi, as a man who had given so much thought to panchayat institutions, a man who had given so much thought to education, to the mind of the children. This, also Priyadarshiji, you were telling us about his Sahoj Path. Such a wonderful creation, incomparable, I think, in any other language. Such a wonderful thing. For children and their education, to grow them creatively, to help them creatively to relate to the world and to enjoy their learning, their knowledge. So this was my third point that I wanted to talk about, Hemantiji. Please unmute yourself.
It was enchanting. It was illuminating. Where to start and where to end when we talk about Rabindranath? He is in our veins, he is in our thoughts, philosophy, ideals, everything. If Dr. Datta, if you have any thoughts you want to share, please go ahead.
Well, let me clarify that I am not Dr. Datta. I don't have any PhD degree. I just, what Joydeep Maharaj was saying about the children, in his Jibon Sriti, he writes that when Tagore, he was growing up, there was hardly any book for children. And especially there was no way, to like paintings or with lithographic, there was no book like that. So I think, that also prompted Tagore to come up with the books for the children. And as Joydeep Maharaj said, what an impact he had on the shaping of the Bengali language. So he also says, like in Jibon Sriti at one place, that he has also paid attention to the language that is spoken by the servants of the house. He said even that has also evolved with time. He was, so conscious of that. And about the book of children, he said in our time, the book for the children were, so murderously boring that hardly we used to prefer reading that. And he had one of the teacher, that I think is Mr. Aghar Chandra, who was a medical student, and every day he used to come and give him tuition, which he did not like. So even if it was raining, he would come, and only time in a medical college, there was some brawl had taken place, and that tutor had gone, was injured, that he did not come. Tagore did not want to the formal education. When he was very young, he used to, when he was not a school student, he used to weep that, other or his elder brothers, etc., were going to school. So somebody who used to work in his home used to say that, আজ যেমন তুমি স্কুলে যাবার জন্য কাঁদছো, একদিন স্কুলে না যাবার জন্য এইভাবে কাঁদবে. That now that you wish to go to school, but a time will come, you will cry in the same manner not wanting to go to school. He said that I have forgotten the name of the person, even his face, but I think in life nobody had said a more true word. So that is why this Tagore's inspiration to come out with an alternative model of idea, which is as Jadip Maharaj said about the Vishwabharati. And Vishwabharati now is, of course, a university who are teaching their science also and other things for which it was not meant. Vishwabharati was meant for something else. And in 1951, when Vishwabharati was being transformed into a university by giving a statute, many people took part in that debate. And at that time, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was our education minister. And Dr. Shyam Prasad Mukherjee also said it. And Dr. Shyam Prasad Mukherjee said that when he was young, he remembered that Tagore once came to his illustrious father, Ashutosh Mukherjee, and he want to have some kind of a understanding with the Calcutta University, if that can happen, where Calcutta University gives them degrees but without interfering with the autonomy of the institution. So when government tried to bring this 1951 bill on the Vishwabharati University, at least it was very careful, and all the members of the parliament, that they should not impinge upon the not only on the working the autonomy, but also the unique idea that Tagore had his mind, and by transforming it into a modern day university, it ran the risk. And you see now what actually happened to Vishwabharati. It has somehow unfortunately got become like any other provincial university, which often keeps in news for the wrong reasons. That is another thing. I think that Sahaj part, which runs into 4 volumes, at least first 3 volumes, I believe, are entirely by Tagore, and the paintings done by Nandulal Boshu, who was, I think, the student of his nephew Avanindranath. It was a very good book, and in all other languages of the world, you can learn the alphabets from any sources, any publisher writing any book. But in Bengali, interestingly, there are only 3 books for the last 120 years to learn Bengali. One is Sahaj Path by Rabindranath Tagore, Hashi Kushi by Jogendranath Sarkar, and of course the old one is, of course, the Borno Porichoy by Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. So Tagore was very interested about the children, and many of the Tagore's songs are sung by the children, and they also do it what is called the Nitya Natika. They are meant for the children and with children's love. So although they might have very profounder meanings, but even the children could understand that. So that is it. I think this is what I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Datto. Without mentioning one thing, that the affinity about science, learning science, Rabindranath used to be so interested in learning science, and being a science student for myself, I always used to wonder that what Rabindranath's view on science. So I was doing, a few research, and then found out that one article got published on Rabindranath Tagore's science, interest in science, published online by Cambridge University. 2019, it got published, and it says that in 1925, Rabindranath Tagore wrote to Prafulla Chandra Rai. We know about him, the distinguished chemist, scientist. I was sitting reading Scientific American when I noticed an envelope from the University College of Science where Prafulla Chandra taught. So my thinking just then, that how many poets read Scientific American as a pastime, one really wonders. And another episode that I found very interesting about Rabindranath's conversation with Einstein. And Einstein actually was asking Rabindranath this question: do you believe in the divine as isolated from the world? As we know, they had a very beautiful conversation between them, and it is an excerpt from one of Einstein and Tagore's conversation. So he actually responded, not isolated. The infinite personality of man comprehends the universe. There cannot be anything that cannot be subsumed by the human personality. And this proves that the truth of the universe is human truth. I have taken a scientific fact to explain this. Rabindranath is explaining. How he is explaining? Matter is composed of protons and electrons with gaps between them. But matter may seem to be solid. Similarly, humanity is composed of individuals, yet they have their interconnection of human relationship, which gives living unity to man's world. The entire universe is linked up with us in a similar manner. It is a human universe. I have pursued this thought through art, literature, and the religious consciousness of man. How wonderful. We also know that Rabindranath and Jagdish Chandra Bose actually had a very cordial relationship. When Rabindranath was managing the Jamindari in Silaidaho in Bangladesh, J.C. Bose used to join him on the river boat, and they used to exchange their thoughts through songs, poems, and scientific experiments, what J.C. Bose was doing that time. So that really is a wonder how his talent reaches everywhere. The divinity. Also, he wrote a letter to physicist Satyen Bose. Any educated person must enter the arena of science, if not the core of science. And in his regard, it is no shame to take the help of literature. I am not a serious student of science, but I had this endless temptation for tasting the juice of science from my very childhood. I was then about 12 when I had gone with my revered father to the Dalhousie Hills. After the day's hard work, we would settle on a divan in the veranda. The sun provides a curtain of light around the earth, and therefore we are unable to visualize the universe beyond. During the day ends and the sun sets, the lid of light disappears, and it is then innumerable stars lit up the dark sky. And his father, Maharshi Devendranath Thakur, he used to actually explain to him about stars, about the galaxy, about the darkness of the sky. And he used to be bewildered, surprised with all this unknown. So with that, I will request Mr. Datto, please elaborate on Swadeshi Bhavna of Rabindranath.
Yes, thank you, Harmontidi. And I think this very illuminating lecture by Joydeep Maharaj, I think little remains to be said. But I have been requested to speak on the Swadeshi thought of Tagore. I cannot translate it to patriotism or exactly anything like that, but let's keep it Swadeshi. There is a lecture which was given by Rabindranath Tagore during the heydays of the anti-partition movement in Bengal, which lasted from 1905 to 1911, but Tagore was associated towards the beginning of it. So there was a lecture that he delivered at the Minerva Theatre at that time. It was called the Swadeshi Samaj. that lecture he had to give again on a popular demand. And in Swadeshi Samaj book, in the preface that he writes one thing, that this Swadeshi Samaj is somehow his lecture was prompted by scarcity of water in Bengal, which is otherwise known as a very watery and wet province. So Tagore says that in previously, that it is in pre-colonial India or in ancient India, water, education, uh, upkeep of the temples, the many things were actually not done by the state, but they were the responsibility of the society. But now what has happened with the growth, with the coming of the British and the growth of the new idea of state on the European model, amongst the Indians also, we want state to do everything. This, he said, has actually resulted in many problems. And at one place he says there, brilliantly, that line he says, that today we are subjugated not because the British is ruling over us, but because the society has relinquished many of the responsibilities willingly to the state. The responsibilities which belong to the society earlier, it has transferred to the state. And in that sense, we have become a subjugated people. We are not subjugated because the British are ruling over us. We are subjugated because we have voluntarily given up the things which belong to the realm of the society to the state. Now, what would state do? State, if you say about water supply, the state may, in a budget, give you a half lakh of rupees or something like this. But it is the society that has to do the upkeep. That was Tagore's idea, that the wellspring of the Indian society is actually not in its political institution, but in its social institutions. Had our wellspring of life been in the political institution, Indian society and Indian civilization would also have perished like many other civilizations of the world. But because the source of the life of Indian society was actually in her social institutions, India could survive even without political power for long. Actually, when we are speaking about the Muslim period, especially Bengal, which came under Islamic rule somewhere around the late 12th century. So how Bengal still had survived with its own, and even if you see in Bangladesh also, as you know, that whatever Tagore's views on the Muslims, it is the Tagore song written on the Bengal, that is also the national anthem of Bangladesh. So Tagore is the one person whose song who wrote the national anthem for at least two nations. So this is what Tagore says in his essay, which is called Swadesh. He says that when we see Indian history, the way Indian history is taught, it seems to be a history of a clash and conflict. Some people, he was meaning to the Greeks, the Shakas and Hunas, invaders came upon India, and if one invader goes, another comes. If one invader grows weak, there is another invader to deal with. So if an outsider sees the history of India, he will only see Indian history as a long succession of invasion and the Indians fighting against it. But he says, like a person who is outside the house, when there is a sandstorm, when there is a storm there, or a whirlwind, that is the most important event of the day. He says it in his essay Swadesh. That is the most important event. But at the time when the storm is going on outside, do you think nothing is going inside our homes? No, the life goes on almost as usual in the home. So to the historians write about Delhi and Agra, which was the capital of India, as you know, during the Delhi Sultanate period and the Mughal period. But he says when there was Delhi and Agra, there was also Navadvip and Benares. Navadvip and Benares represent the centers of Indian learning. So he said when we see Indian history from outside, we see as if it is a political history. It is everything is centered around Delhi and Agra, but that is not true. There is an inner history of India which revolves around the places like Benares and Navadvip. If when there was Delhi and Agra, there was Navadvip and uh, Benares also. So Rabindranath Tagore's view of India is a perennial India. It is a timeless India. It is an everlasting India. That is the wellspring of Tagore's view of India. If you see in Tagore's writing, I think the more Bengali people will be able to appreciate it. In Bengal, you have the names of girls Ujjaini. Now, Ujjaini is actually Ujjain, it is in Madhya Pradesh, but you don't find in North India the names, the girl Ujjaini. You have the name Bipasha, which comes from Punjab. The girls in Bengal have the name Bipasha. You also find the name Prasenjit and Udayan, who are actually the kings of Koshal and Avantika in ancient India. This is Tagore in his writings wrote so much about, he tried to revive this idea of the ancient India. Of course, he was not a historian. He did not write it with the dates and, one article which I once read in Desh, that Tagore was very unparticular about the date. He would mix up, even in his own life. He did not remember once that how long ago, years ago, his daughter was married, without 20 years or was it 10 years? He cannot recall that. But Tagore's idea of Indian history was an inner Indian history. That is why you find that Tagore, many of the Tagore's poems are on Gautam Buddha. And many of the poems that you were, Jadip Maharaj was also referring to, and Hoymontidi was also referring to, that about the Shivaji Utsav. But even earlier, Shivaji Utsav was written around 1906, I think, when Shivaji Utsav was actually celebrated in Calcutta on the behest of when Tilak and Kapade also came there, and Shakaram Ganesh Deuskar was there. So he wrote Shivaji Utsav. But even in the late 19th century, many of the poems that he wrote, which are in Kotha, in this book called Kotha o Kahini, there are poems on Gautam Buddha, there are poems on Shivaji, there are poems of the Sikh Guru like Guru Gobind Singh. There is there are others like any other some of the Hindu hero or the episodes, the lesser known episodes. So this was Tagore's view, was seeing India in its entirety and in the perennial cultural discovery for him. On Gautam Buddha, Tagore was one of the person. Of course, Gautam Buddha was completely forgotten in India. Very few people know about that. He was discovered during the archaeological, philological, and the numismatic discoveries which actually happened with the early British Orientalists. And then came many Indian historians also who wrote about the period of Gautam Buddha in early 20th century. But Tagore in the 19th century wrote so much about Buddha, but his writing about Buddha was not giving on the Buddha's history, but Buddha's own outlook. And some of the poems like the Nagor Lokhi and others, he used to idolize Buddha. But when he first went to Sri Lanka, he found that he actually criticizes the parochialism in the name of the Buddhism that he finds in Sri Lanka and at the other places. It was when he was in Sri Lanka once, he had gone to Sri Lanka 4 times. Once for his play Shapmochon. In the 1922, I have come across a poem which was written by Robert Rosaiya Thambi, who was of course a Christian Tamil, who later on became Solicitor General in Ceylon. So he, as a young person, was present at Jaffna when Tagore came there, and that poem which I have, I don't completely remember it, but he said, "Full well do I remember those days when you came to our palm-fringed isle." So he says in the last line that you are the Rishi. Of course, that Robert Rosaiya Thambi could not understand Bengali, but even then he was one of the persons to say Tagore was a Rishi. And this is again maybe the power of translation which we were saying. So what I wish to say, that Tagore's understanding of Hindu civilization was based on very culture. In 1927, when he went for a tour of the Subarna Bhumi, or the Southwest Asia, Southeast Asia, actually, the Malaya, Singapore, and the other places, Bali, Borneo, Java, etc. He was accompanied by some others. Most well known amongst them was, I think, Suniti Kumar Chattopadhyay, who later on wrote a book called Deepmoy Bharat. And Tagore also wrote on that journey a book called Javajatrir Patro. If you see the Deepmoy Bharat, it is much more factual, giving facts, etc. Tagore says that he is not bothered so much about the facts. Tagore was bothered actually about the insight, about the feeling, and how Hindu civilization was alive in Southeast Asia despite a major part of being converted in Indonesia to Islam. That he writes very well, and he writes about the temples, about the Ramayana, and how it is the Ramayana paintings that are there in houses, even of the Muslims. He writes that how the Ramayana is played there. He writes that. So this was in 1927, and he writes there that when he was referring to a historical incident, that when Indian Ocean came under the Islamic, the Arabic dominance, Hindus stopped going to the sea. In the ancient time, our Hindu forefathers had gone to Southeast Asia and set up their temples, including the world's biggest temple, Angkor Wat. And Tagore says that in between, India forgot Southeast Asia. The Hindu gave up seafaring, and now with the change of the time, seafaring has again begun. So one of his poems that was originally called Bali, but later on the name was changed to Shagorika, is actually a poem which says that a lover from India has come to his beloved, which is the personified Southeast Asia, and has come from India, and says that once he, if I may remember that poem, I don't completely remember that poem, that he comes there as if to a beloved, and he says that not as a king, and not as I came as a very simple person, and Southeast Asia actually Southeast Asia welcomes him. Even Tagore himself was welcomed there. So Tagore's understanding of Indian culture was completely of a perennial India, as I refer to some of the things. Of course, later on, Tagore's family, as you know, was associated with the Hindu Mela. Hindu Mela was actually an attempt to take the political the consciousness from the cities to the suburban areas and to the villages. It started somewhere 1867, if I'm not wrong, by Nabagopal Mitra, and the real brain behind it writing was actually Sri Aurobindo's grandfather, maternal grandfather, Rajnarayan Bose. Actually, Rajnarayan Bose and Tagore's father, Maharishi Debendranath Tagore, had a very interesting connection. When Tagore's father started a magazine, which in the 1840s, I'm not able to. It's a very interesting name, but I'm not able to just recall it now. No. So the first translation of Rig Veda was started by Rajnarayan Bose. So Maharishi Debendranath gave him that space, and later on, you know, Maharishi Debendranath's son Rabindranath Tagore and Sri Aurobindo had also a very interesting connection. In 1907, Rabindranath Tagore writes on Sri Aurobindo, Aurobindo Robindrer Loho Namaskar, He Bondhu Desho Bondhu Bharat Attar Banimurti Tumi. It is in 1907. I think this is just before he got. I was just referring to that name of that magazine. It was Tattvabodhini Patrika. Though Tattvabodhini Sabha was merged with Brahmo Samaj, but that magazine lived on almost for 90 years, I'm told. So Aurobindo's grandfather and Tagore's father had also had an opportunity to work together in the 1840s for some time, and then on Rajnarayan Bose went and he settled down in Deoghar, and Rajnarayan Bose was actually called the grandfather of the of nationalism, and many, including Vivekananda, Shakaram Deuskar, and all others, many were influenced by him. So Tagore, when Aurobindo became a national figure, and later on he got embroiled in the Alipur bomb case, but later on when Aurobindo went to Pondicherry, somewhere around 1928, Tagore also went to meet there, and by the ship, and then they came through the ship by the sea route. They came to Pondicherry from Calcutta, and Tagore also met Aurobindo there, and he said, some 20 years ago I had said, Aurobindo Robindre Loho Namaskar. I had at that time I had seen him, him as a rising star in the nationalistic field. Now I see him as a sage. So now again I say to him, Aurobindo Robindre Loho Namaskar. And this was the Tagore's view on this. But many of the people are a bit confused on Rabindranath Tagore's view on with the British. Those who say that Tagore was actually soft on the British, I would like to read them some of the essays which are contained in a book called Raja Proja. And one of the essays there called Kontorod, or Suppression of Voice, was actually written by Tagore. It was delivered as a speech by Tagore in Bengali, and Tagore's writing was very humorous. Sometimes it could be very sarcastic. And he says that Tagore says that if the Bengali newspapers or the vernacular newspaper, why bring this draconic clauses against them? Actually, these newspapers, through which these newspapers, British can actually know what is going on in the Indian mind. If you suppress them, you lose a way completely. There is that story that before the 1857 revolt, there were these chapatis that were, I do not know whether there is a story about that. This was rotated from one cantonment to the other cantonment. It was said to be, it was actually a message for the revolution. He said not a single word was written on that chapati, but yet that led to a great conflagration. The snake bite is actually dangerous because a snake comes in secret and it bites you in complete silence. So he said if British want that after having taken us to this position, when there is a media, when there is a press, they again want to suppress, actually it would be actually goes against the safety of the British Empire itself. And another thing he says about in that Raja Proja, which says that the British had he called it Doipayan Sanskriti, the islanded. I mean, Doipayan also means something very different in India. It refers to Krishna Doipayan. But the islanded mindset which it says. He says that the British would like to do material and moral improvement of India, but they would not come in close contact with us. I mean, British would prefer to, because in those days, very few Indians used to wear shoes when going outside, unless today. But a British would always wear shoe, even if one is going to bed. That means wherever even subtle and soft sensibilities are required, that the British would not care about that. The British is more careful that there is no threat to his empire, and for that reason, what he is doing, he has put on his own boot, and there is an entire field, and if field sometimes the birds come, so the British actually want to shoo away the birds, but in that process, he is running over the entire field. Completely overlooking the fact that it is not the bird which is eating more of the grains, but it is actually the boots which is completely crushing the grains. So British culture is like this, that in India they would try to bring laws, they would try to bring things for the moral and material improvement of India. but they would not come into close contact with the Indians to know about what is there in the heart of the Indians. This same thing we find in his 1916 lecture, which is called the Nationalism, that he gave in America. That nationalism lecture was very, you can say it was very subtle, and it for some people it could be very controversial also. But in that, Tagore says that the Indian concept of nationhood is very different from the European concept of nationhood. The European concept of nationhood is organization of all the military and commercial strength to achieve a materialistic purpose. The Indian sense of nationhood is not like this, although in a modern period, Indians were trying to come up with that kind of manhood. So he said that the British establishment in India is completely impersonal. It is impassive. It has no sensibility. And he gives the example that sometimes, and we use the very humorous, his writings has, very large dollops of humor. And he says that in the newspapers nowadays, you can find across advertisements which say that certain biscuit makers produce biscuits which are completely untouched by hand. I mean, they are so hygienic. I mean, in India, you can still give people through hand, but in the Western countries, it is completely forbidden. People have to wear a gloves or something like this. I mean, even human touch is sometimes dangerous. It can lead to some kind of infection. So they would always sometimes wear gloves or like this. So Tagore says that the British contact with India is completely like this, completely uncontaminated or untouched by the hands. I mean, there is nothing human. It is like a big machine. The British Empire is like a machine. There is no human sense in that. And that is what actually struck Tagore the most. That, and in another is I think it is called the Poshim Jatri Diary, in which Tagore, very interesting, when Tagore wrote that, his age was almost similar at the time of when Swami Vivekananda went and delivered the lecture in Chicago. It almost came about that 1891 or 1893, I don't remember. So therein, at one place, Tagore says, even at that time, many Indians had this view that the British can be overthrown, but Tagore says we don't realize that how powerful the British are. But he says there another interesting thing, that which very interesting in the hindsight, that all of us felt that the freedom movement is actually about expelling the British from India. But he said, I mean, what will you do to the new ways and the means with which the British is given to the Indians? That the whole society's grammar has changed. He interestingly says there, now কলেজে পড়ো, অফিসে কাজ করো, হোটেলে খাও. So Tagore had this subtlety to understand that even if British goes away from India, the state will continue like this. I mean, the ancient state, that coming after the British had become redundant. I mean, when we got independence from the British, we had a parliament, we passed the laws, we have a bureaucracy that is apolitical and completely non-military bureaucracy. All these are of a successor state of Britain. So this India, which got independence from the British in the 1947, was not the same India that has gone under the British. For some reason, there was, I think, some things also Indians gained from that. Like we have a united military command. Previously, whenever an invader came from outside, there were small kingdoms. No battle would last more than a day. Now we have got so much of resources that we have a unified command, that India is much more safe and secure than it was in the pre-British times. But he says, but Tagore realizes this, that what will you do with this new form of state, that the grammar of the life has completely changed. I think this is a person with Tagore's subtlety can understand that. This is one of the reasons that forms a very barrier about Tagore's. Like now we have got only a few days ago, I mean, some 20 years ago, somebody has said, how would have Tagore referred to the coming of the internet? Internet actually freed us from many of the boundaries, and probably Tagore would have liked this, that, all the boundaries, he hated many of the boundaries Tagore did not like. So internet, Tagore would have welcomed internet. So another thing is that I was trying to think how Tagore would have responded, how Tagore would have celebrated or how they responded to India's success of Chandrayaan. Probably yes. Now we are in the global elite, global club. We have landed in the moon, though we have not set any human beings, but we have landed in the moon. That is for a very privileged few. India has broken into that club. But now again, what we are feeling probably that from Tagore's point of view, it would be that after all we have gone to the moon. It is very good achievement, but it is still a material achievement. Tagore's view is in the song that আকাশ ভরা সূর্য তারা বিশ্ব ভরা প্রাণ তাহারি মাঝখানে আমি পেয়েছি মোর স্থান বিস্ময়ে তাই জাগে আমার গান. That Tagore says that kind of an amazement that there is the sky or the space is full of stars, sun and the moons, and in that, and the world and the space is full of the vital energy, the pran, and in that I have got my place as a human being in this vast cosmos. That actually gives me a thrill, that actually excites me, that thrill. So everything about Tagore's this amazement. So Tagore's way of the, if you Shantiniketan, which unfortunately I have not gone, there is a quote from the Taittiriya Upanishad which says Akash Sharirang Brahma Pranaramang Mananandang, like this. So in our Upanishads we have this Akash Sharirang Brahma, the sky-bodied divine, which is actually our inner space. So Tagore would have been actually more interested in this inner space. And Tagore's Upanishads, Tagore had a deep interest in the Upanishads, and that is quoted there also. This idea of Tagore's universe is not the universe that is merely outside, but what interacts in this. One of his Hibbert lectures, that is the religion of man, Tagore also says that the organisms that monstrously develop the size of their beings. I think he was, I do not know, I was at that time, I mean, he did not say about dinosaurs especially. They got extinct from the world. But human beings, if you compare him, is much inferior in many of the physical strength or physical size to many of the animals. But not only human being has survived. Why? Because human beings did not consider their growth only in the physical plane. We considered that there is an atom, from that atom a cell is made, then the cells combine. Human beings, development of the human being cannot be solely be measured on the achievements of the material plane. This is again, this is the view of Tagore. So this amazement, I find, nowadays we may measure Tagore only by whether he was a nationalist or he was an internationalist. So I would call Tagore is still the person through which India is known at many places abroad. You have the Tagore centers. You have many people who do not know Bengali, most of the people in the world though. But they have tried to know India through Tagore. He was in touch with Romarola and many others, Indologists. Many others came here like Rottenstein, who were actually people came from China, by knowing this, attracted by Tagore. In many of the countries that Tagore went, as I said, refer to about the Persia, Tagore went to various countries. Neither Tagore knew their language, nor Tagore, our Prime Minister Modi ji went to Greece recently. Tagore had gone to Greece some many years ago, and a few years ago there is a Indo-Hellenic society which is there in Athens. They brought out a book in 1912 to mark, I think, 75 years or 80 years of Tagore visiting Greece for a single day. So many people who know about people, many of the days we know India through Gandhi, but Tagore's is another way through which India is known. Even if you go to far off Argentina, many of the places in like Spain, in the Hispanic world, Tagore is known there. Uh, in the Hispanic world, both in Spain and in the South America, Tagore is known there. In the Japan and also in China. With China, we have now got so many of the problems. But I think in the last book fair, when I had gone there just before the pandemic came, China had set up a pavilion in the World Book Fair in Delhi, where there were no books, but it was only dedicated to relationship of India and China, mostly based on Tagore. At that time also Doklam, etc. were going on, no doubt about that. But it is interestingly, people in the world know India through Tagore. Oh, you've come from the land of Tagore. So that is the most interesting thing. And I think Tagore, I would just finally take a few more minutes, as I have taken a long time. When Tagore was born in the year 1861, that is also the year two great Indian leaders were born. One is Madan Mohan Malviya and another is Motilal Nehru. That was also the year the Indian Councils Act 1861 was passed, which gave access to the Indian to the council, not mandatorily, but it was still the Indians could now be admitted, which was previously by the Chartered Acts of till 1853. It was not there. Tagore had attended many of the Congress sessions. He had sung songs there, Bande Mataram, of course, but there was a song like Oi Bhubo Namo Namo Mohini and Janagana Mano. I would just expatiate on Janagana Mano also because there is a controversy. But you see, Tagore knew personally many of the leaders who are in the independence movement. Like Tagore knew Gandhi, Tagore knew well Subhash Chandra Bose, Jawaharlal Nehru, and many others came there. Acharya Kriplani also, I believe. There were others who came to Tagore. But Tagore never had this idea that emancipation of India could take place through politics. So he did not, according to my knowledge, he was not very interested in the Congress, although he had attended some of the Congress sessions. His family at one time donated money to the Congress. But Tagore knew that India's path is not primarily a political path. What we speak today of nationalism or universalism, we see it through the political prism. That was not with Tagore. And Tagore also, Subhash Chandra Bose, I could speak a few words about this very interesting relationship. As you know, when Subhash Chandra Bose founded the Mohajati Sadhan in Calcutta, Mohajati Sadhan was, built later on because Subhash Chandra Bose had to leave in 1941. But there was actually a Silanyas, so the stone laying, cornerstone laying ceremony had been done. And it was there is a video also available of that moment when Tagore came. It may be available on the internet also. So he called Tagore to lay this cornerstone. And Tagore also wrote when Subhash Chandra Bose was expelled almost from the Congress after the Tripuri Congress. So he said he had written a very letter, idolizing Subhash Chandra Bose, and which he was the first to call Subhash Chandra the Deshonayak, the captain of the nation. Ami tomake Deshonayaker pode boron korilam. He called Subhash Chandra Bose Deshonayak. So Tagore on certain things has not been actually afraid. He supported Subhash Chandra Bose. He said that not because I am a Bengali, not because Subhash Chandra Bose belongs to Bengal and he has been aggrieved and he has been the injustice. But I say as an Indian, that what has happened to Subhash is wrong. Another thing, when he went to Japan, there is an interesting story of when Rashbihari Bose in 1915 fled India. There was what is called red corner notice against him, and that there was warrant against him, and he ran away under the name of P.N. Tagore, ostensibly a family member of the Tagores or relative of the Tagore. He said that Rabindranath Tagore is going to Japan in a few days, and I am going there to find out about his accommodation. And okay, he was allowed at that time. There was not much of passport, etc. was necessary. So he, in a ship, he went away to Japan. And then after the British realized that actually those whom they wanted to arrest has completely fled. Uh, Actually, this idea then came to British that Rabindranath Tagore is going there as a royal guest of the Japanese king. So why do they? He would need somebody to go there and find out about his accommodation. But when Rabindranath Tagore went there, he visited the Rash Bihari Bose's family. There is a picture, there is a photograph, which may be available on the internet about his family. And Rash Bihari Bose also translated Sheshar Kobita, the last novel that Jodip Maharaj referred to, in Japanese. So that is also another very interesting thing about Tagore. And Tagore, especially in the what you call the anti-Bengal partition movement, some of the Tagore's very interesting poems were written about that time, and like Omolo Dhabolo Palete Legeche Mondo Modhuru Hawa Dekhi Nai Kobu Dekhi Nai Amono Toroni Bawa Tor Mora Gange Ban Esheche Bhasha Tori Joyma Bole. All these are said to be actually seen the life that was in full flow in the 1905. That is a new turn that came into the life of the Bengal. And Tagore was the first person who did a Rakhi Bandhan Utsav. I mean, Raksha Bandhan is coming, but this Raksha Bandhan is more cultural, religious. Raksha Bandhan Tagore that is did was against the partition of Bengal. It was sometime in November. I do not exactly remember the date. In 1905. October 60 October, that is 1905. And that interestingly is written in a very by Ghorowa, by Rani Chando, and Abanindranath Tagore was there. But then he realized, his family has put up some money to have a ship that used to commute people from this shore of Ganga to the other shore, all free of cost. It was called the Swadeshi steamer. And later on, it failed because there was no monetary idea behind this. But Tagore also got, I think, disillusioned by some of the so-called leaders of the anti-Bengal partition movement, whose shadow you can find in his novel Ghore Baire, The Home and the World. That the people who appear to be outside leaders and great patriots from outside, what is actually their inner life. So Tagore said that. So Tagore actually created a distance with him and with the other leaders, and that he opted out of politics, as far as I know then. And Tagore also at one point of time, some say, dissociated himself with all this later 19th century writing about his nationalism. There is what you call the aggressive nationalism, when he speaks of Banda Bahadur, of the last Sikh Guru Govind Singh, of Shivaji, etc. But even in 1906, Shivaji has written that Shivaji Utsav, which is a very which is in views of some a more mature work than even his work Bharat Tirtho. Some feel like that. And finally, I come to this. There is a controversy regarding Tagore's 1911 song, Jono Gono Mono, whose a 5-stanza poem, but whose first stanza is only used as the national anthem. Now, if you find there is in his book of songs, which is called Gitobitan, there is a particular section called Swadesh Porjay, as there is, Jodip Maharaj said, Prem and Puja, there is Swadesh, then there is some other also. So in that Swadesh Porjay, many of the songs are there. So this Jonogono Mono is also there in the Swadesh Porjay, and it is actually a mistaken belief that Tagore wrote it in favor of George V. If you go by the contemporaneous record, the most important of it, the record of the 1911 Congress session in Calcutta, it says nothing like that. It says there was some young small girls who wrote a song in praise of the king in Hindi, but Tagore's song was never was seen as in praise of George V. I think where from this confusion stemmed was the Anglo-Indian press. Most of us journalists has left the scene from that time, and they just wrote it on a hearsay. And this actually controversy dogged Tagore during his own lifetime. And Tagore says, no, the dispenser of India's destiny, that Bharato Bhagyo Vidhata, he cannot be George V or George VI. It is never like that. It is actually the destiny, the dispenser of destiny. It is actually the Almighty, probably, that Tagore was referring to as Bharato Bhagyo Vidhata. Patano Obhudaya Bondhura Pantha Jugo Jugo Dhabito Jatri. So India marches on through many of the hurdles and the ups and the downs and of history, vicissitudes of history. So that is one thing. This was quite settled at that time. No Indian newspaper identified Tagore's song in praise of George V. And this is actually a post facto debate that rose. Of course, it happened during the life of Tagore, and Tagore was tired of clarifying it. And if you see the other poems of Swadesh Porjay, Amar Desher Mati Tomar Pore Chhuai Mata. Interestingly, we say that Tagore saw Bharat Bongo. Tagore's three levels. Something says the Bongo Mata, and he also says the Bharat Mata, and he said Vishwa Mata. World is also our mother, as we say. It is in the Atharva Veda. It's where. So Tagore is like that rishi. He sees things in the perspective. He sees that India as a part of the whole of humanity. Tomate Vishwamayer Achol Pata. How I love India? Because I see the entire world in you. And if you see in the 1938 Tripuri lecture of Subhash Chandra Bosu, Subhash Chandra Bosu says in the last that India could said to be a mini world, and solution to the problems of India would bring to the solution of the problem of the world. It is India freed is world saved. So that probably give some idea into how Tagore's viewed the nationalism. And entire of the Tagore's life was passed in the colonial era, in which the Indians did not have much say in the affairs of the state, even if they have gone into assembly. But Tagore had this distrust of the councils. Tagore said this distrust of the newspapers, and it is one of his writings in that collection of essays which is called Swadesh. He envisaged a person called Gurudev. Tagore says himself, Gurudev. He says that our Gurudev will be the person who would lead India. He does not want to give lectures in the council. He does not want to get adoration from the English newspapers. He does not want to get the clappings in the from this public meetings. Whom we call Gurudev, or the person who will save India, will actually have to work from his center of the meditation. And that is what Jadip Maharaj also says, that yes, Tagore belonged to. Tagore was born like he was a person from Calcutta, but his father had actually set up Shantiniketan. It was left to Tagore to enlarge the Shantiniketan and give it a new meaning as an ashram, not only as an ashram, but it's a center of education. There's a center of art. So it is like this that Tagore was born. It is like that Parashuram, who was called, he killed his mother, but for a purpose he said again, bring my mother to life. Tagore was born in the Gangetic plains, the very lush green. He was in the Jodashako, their family. But Tagore went away to a village in the Rad Bengal, which is an arid part of Bengal, because of course they had some connections there for a long time. But it was Tagore's area of sadhana was set up there. And that is the most interesting part of Tagore. He might have gone across the world, but Tagore's karma bhumi was in the Birbhum in Shantiniketan. And this Shantiniketan took upon a very expanded meaning due to work of Tagore. Shantiniketan was just simply, grandfather was just simply maybe an ashram. In Tagore, it became a center of education. then the entire place almost took up the name of Shantiniketan. Even the municipality, I think, I have not gone there. It is like this. So that is, Tagore's, what you call, Jadip Maharaj was saying, he was a karma yogi. People should learn from him actually, that even at this advanced stage, Tagore, how he kept it. At the initial days when he was younger, he used to do wrestling also. And Tagore used to always keep his body very fit and used to take a glass of neem juice every day. And there are some interesting anecdotes about that. Once a person came to him and he saw that Tagore taking a juice and he did not know it is of neem. He thought it must be made up some sweet and pishta badam, etc. And he started salivating. So Tagore said, "Would you like to have a glass of this kind of a sharbat?" A person said, "Okay, not bad." So he said to his smiling Tagore said to his personal help that to bring him this, to bring this, told the servant to bring him exactly this kind of a sharbat. But when the person took it, he actually vomited it out. So Tagore laughed very much and he said, "Bring him another glass of with sweetened with badam and peshta. Give him another glass of." So it was like this. So Tagore was a kind of a rishi, and this quality of detachment, that is a very important part of it. Whenever you see that Tagore, one part of Tagore is involved, but other part of the Tagore is already detached. And that is why he is called a rishi. And he had the other ideas which we cannot speak because time is, because Tagore did so many things for the development of the countryside and all other things. This is Tagore. He was not just only a creative person, he was a constructive person. And in the last, I would say that if you say that Tagore's view on independence, Tagore's, if you say independence at Swadhinta or Swatantrata in Hindi, it was not. Tagore's path was the path of mukti. Tagore liked this word. I think once somebody came and asked to give a name of a film, Tagore gave the name Mukti. In Mukti, Tagore's word, that is the India's way is Mukti, the emancipation, or whatever you say, that liberation. That was the Tagore's path. That India may be politically free, but whether India stick to its own goal, its own originality, and that is the panchayat system that Jagdish Maharaj was saying, that panchayat, that Tagore was not so enamored with Parliament. He had gone to British Parliament also when he was very young. He had seen lectures there in House of Commons, but Tagore was not enamored with it. So anyway, so Tagore's, I think we have to end, and so like it. I hope I have been able to give something of Tagore's view. So I think that is it.
Thank you so much, Priyadarshiji. It was such an insightful discussion, and your view on Tagore on so many things. It was definitely amazing, and all our viewers, particularly non-Bengali viewers, they had an extensive idea and idea about this great person and his work, his creativity, his involvement in the national revolution in India during 19th century and afterwards, and also related to modern revolution in India. So I definitely think like we need to have a couple of more sessions when we talk about Rabindranath. Talking about Rabindranath and in one session, it's not sufficient. So we got a couple of questions here and a lot of comments I can see. So the question I want you to address, I'll ask Maharaj to address. How does Rabindranath view of cosmopolitanism in sync with Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam?
I think
You can just say it in
City has very, very wonderfully elucidated on that topic about his idea of humanity and his idea of his country, his completely different idea about nationalism, self-governance, and mukti from a personal point of view and also from a civilizational point of view. I think he has made it very clear, and we had a 3-hour conversation already. I
I
think we
think
do
yes,
not
I
need
think
to, yes,
yeah,
put
no,
most of
yeah, I also.
it.
Uh,
But I would just like, as a just an ending note about this controversy regarding the national anthem, I will just give my personal feeling about it. Look, we have grown up singing the national anthem. We have grown up looking at the Indian flag and doing namaskar and bowing our head to our country. We have not thought about George V when we were singing the national
yes,
anthem. You see, so the anthem now, Janagana Mana, does not belong to Rabindranath Thakur anymore. It belongs to us.
yes,
It
us,
belongs to us and our relationship with our country. So I think that is enough. I do not
yes,
really. I do. We do not need to hassle over these, bicker over these things anymore
yes,
after
yes.
all these years. Yes, Ayantiji, you can sign off if you want to.
One more
Yes.
question came like, what is the connection between Rabindranath and Vivekananda? Pranams.
Uh,
Um, just a question, could you discuss about two trends of Swamiji and Ravi Thakur? Very
Yes,
briefly, if you
this calls for
can.
another episode. Actually,
Another
Yeah,
episode actually.
exactly.
it's this calls for another 2-hour episode.
So,
I think we should
Yes,
end. I think it's
I
11
think we
o'clock
should
yeah,
here.
end now.
Vivekananda,
Yes,
actually, we are going to have a session on
yes,
Vivekananda, so we can address this question in there.
Yes.
That brings me to the last concluding session, and there I want to um, just I want to conclude with a poem that I wrote on his birthday, and that poem is in Bengali, and I want to share in Bengali. সবই তো বলে গেছো কবি জীবনের অন্তরালে, করেছো ধিক্ষার আবার প্রশংসাও, উজ্জীবিত করে মানবিকতা, উন্মোচন করে মুক্তির উচ্ছ্বাস, প্রকৃত শিক্ষার বলে। এ শিক্ষা পুঁথিগত নয়, নহে এ কোনো ডিগ্রি, এ যেন অন্তঃসলীলা চেতনার শক্তি। তবুও জীবন কেন হারিয়ে যায় অনাকাঙ্ক্ষিত অচেতনতার গহ্বরে। তোমারও তো দুঃখ ছিল কবি, বুক চাপা কান্না, তবুও কলম তো ধরেছিলে, ছড়িয়েছিলে হিরে পান্না, জীবনের লাগামটা ধরেছিলে যেন কুরুক্ষেত্রের কৃষ্ণ সম, দুঃখ পান করেছিলে হে জিতেন্দ্রিয়, প্রজ্ঞা তুমি হে বন্ধু, হে বীর, বাঙালিরে করো আরেকটিবার উন্নত শির। In today's context, Bengal, when we look at Bengal, it pains us. So after this, all this discussion, after Rabindranath's vision, he was a visionary. So Bengal needs to do lot of things to come up on the front line. And with that, I conclude this session. Thank you so much to Maharaj and Priyadarshi ji and Akshay ji for hosting Sangam. I really like to thank from bottom of my heart Sangam Talks for hosting this program. All the viewers out there sitting patiently, listening to us, listening to these esteemed scholars and speakers. I definitely extend my thanks to them and appreciate their being with us. Namaskar.
we also thank you,
Over
Ji and
to
Akshay
Akshay.
Ji.
Thank you, esteemed panelists, for joining. This was a great session. I am sure our audience would have enjoyed it a lot. Indeed, Rabindranath Thakurji was a very multifaceted personality, and we could have talked even more about it, but time has run out now. So, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Bangla Abhar. Thank you, Priyadarshini ji. Thank you, Joydeep Maharaj.
Namaskar.
I will end this session. Thank you.